Bienvenidos, Fright fans, and welcome to the horror show. I am Jaime En Fuego, here to present a special encore presentation that originally in 2015 was seen on my then YouTube channel, Jaime En Fuego, which was for a program called ENFUEGOTAINMENT that is in the process of a relaunch. But we thought that for the month of October, the best thing that we could do was bring the entire series coverage of the 1980s and 90s Tales from the Crypt HBO television show over to the horror show, show it to a larger audience so that they can appreciate all of the hard work. Man, did I bust my ass for that month or so, getting every single one of the 93 episodes done and reviewed and spoken about. We did a little of my little trope at the time, which was Bueno, Malo, Feo, which is a good episode, a bad episode, and an ugly episode. I am taking these 3 at a time, and then also a special 3-episode final edition covering all 3 of the films. Yes, there are in fact 3 films. So join me here as we jump into a little bit of a horrific relic that I am very proud to show all of you guys. So until next time, stay scared.
Paso, boils and ghouls, this is Jaime En Fuego, and you are back on my Tales from the Crypt coverage here for the month of October. A most spectacular undertaking, being that there are 93 episodes of Tales from the Crypt, and there are 31 days in the month of October, so doing 3 a day, a Bueno, a Malo, and a Feo, here for ENFUEGOTAINMENT, where we cover the hottest entertainment with an edge. It just kind of seemed to work out perfectly. So let's get right into it. Let's talk some Bueno, guys, and first and foremost, this would normally be one you might not think I'd like. Yeah, it doesn't deal with the supernatural. It's from a shock suspense stories tale. Yeah, issue number 7 from that EC comic, which was under the Tales from the Crypt umbrella. It was one of the lesser titles and less spectacular, but still, this one packs a punch, and it's directed by Ramon Menendez, who here in 1994, I mean, he was still the most known for having done Stand and Deliver, and that actually starred Mr. Lou Diamond Phillips, who you saw just a couple segments ago for the Oils Well That Ends Well. That's right. And then there was definitely a Malo episode, but hey, nonetheless, I still like Lou Diamond. Doesn't matter what the hell he's doing. And so Stand and Deliver was good. And then you also had Money for Nothing, which was one that John Cusack was in. And so, yeah, Ramon Menendez, he directs this episode, and he brings a very interesting kind of, I guess, directorial touch as far as like balancing everything well, getting the best out of his actors, and he has a good crew to work with in this one. You got Benicio del Toro in a small role, but most importantly, you've got Terry O'Quinn in this. And modern audiences, yeah, we all know him because he won Emmys and just boatloads of awards for all of those seasons on Lost. Tremendous job there, but he actually originally really cemented himself in the public consciousness with a late 80s horror flick called The Stepfather, and the sequel that just unfortunately could not live up to the shebang and the terror of the first one. But Roger Ebert specifically raved about him being like the most excellent or exceptional part of that film. And then he was also in Stephen King's Silver Bullet, the adaptation of that great 12-part, it was almost like 12 chapters, you know, a different cycle of a different month, and, you know, cycling of the moons and stuff, and great werewolf tale. Decent movie, not too bad. And then he was also in Millennium, which was a Chris Carter thing that was done after X-Files. Didn't quite gain the same popularity, but similarly awesome. It had Lance Henriksen on it. So, yeah, man, O'Quinn has so much, he's got great dramatic acting chops, and this is not one of those Tales from the Crypts that has, you know, some laughs here and there, and it's all good, and so on and so forth. No. This is about a public inspector, played by O'Quinn, and he's going down to try to shut down this strip club, and his daughter had apparently done some sordid things at one point, like photographs or filming or something. And so, long story short, the guy's definitely got a chip on his shoulder, and he's like, whereas the other guy took the bribes, I'm not going to do it, man. I am going to stand firm, and I'm going to, you know, shut these slime balls down. And so that's initially his plan, until he finds out his daughter is losing her scholarship, getting booted out of college. And so what's a guy to do? What's daddy to do to save the day but to say, okay, you know what, I'll reconsider on that bribe. And everything is seemingly going well, but hey, I can't divulge anymore because there's twists, there's turns. You really, and it's another one where, you know, the directing really helped with the pacing. I mean, getting the best out of these actors in these scenarios where there was like kind of a building tension of sorts and an air of mystery, almost like a noir type, you know, spookiness to it at times. And yeah, good episode, man. And another person to make mention of is Mr. Scott Nimmerfro, who wrote one of my favorite Tales from the Crypts of the last few seasons, The Werewolf Concerto. He had a hand in the writing and production of Pushing Daisies, which almost had kind of like a horror comedy fantasy type vibe to it. Amazing series. It only lasted 2, but if you get the chance to check it out, you definitely need to. He was most recently directing episodes of Hannibal until it got canceled. Yeah, I know, pretty lame. And then also, he's done some work for Once Upon a Time, which has, I mean, certain fairy tales, man, they have a horror sensibility to them, a scariness. And Once Upon a Time is a great show. I'm not going to mess around. And Nimmerfro, by this point, was like one of the go-tos for Gilbert Adler. You know, just like, by this point, Adler's seemingly been running the show for a while, as I've mentioned on a couple segments already. And so here for the 6th season, you know, he's got his guys to fall back on if he can't get, you know, somebody new and, you know, exciting to kind of jump in. And that is kind of becoming the motif of this era here at the end of Tales from the Crypt. There's only one more season, season 7, and yeah, but hey, Nimmerfro usually brings it, and you know, Menendez did a great job directing. Amazing performance by Terry O'Quinn, and so yeah, at the end of the day, it is most definitely the Bueno. It got me in the feels, man. It really did. So let's jump into the Malo now, the bad episode, the no bueno, as I like to say. And this is another episode that's kind of an example of the fact that the series is kind of waning in consistency of quality. I mean, you still have the occasional really, really good episode, but as far as like just, I mean, 2 out of 3, you know, most of them, like the majority of them in a season being really good. Yeah, this is where it's evidence of the tide turning. It's called Revenge is the Nuts, and there's essentially this corrupt caretaker who's played by Anthony Zerbe, and he can be seen in the Omega Man leading the crazy mutant vampire gang that's going against Charlton Heston, man, who's the last man on Earth. I'm telling you, way better than I Am Legend with Will Smith. Bleh, not a good movie. I don't think it tops you know, The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price as the best adaptation of that book, but seriously, get the Omega Man. Check it out. It's damn good. And then he was also in Cronenberg's The Dead Zone, another great Stephen King adaptation to talk about in this particular segment. And I mean, he also did the 2nd and the 3rd Matrix movie. Let's not talk about those. He was the bad guy in License to Kill. Yeah, that's right. Talk about a Werewolf Concerto connection. That was when Timothy Dalton was still the 007. So he was the bad guy in that one. And most recently, he was seen in American Hustle. So yeah, Zerbe is corrupt and crazy, and yeah, he's a caretaker for all these different blind people in this house that, or this home, I should say, this large, like, you know, facility of sorts where his mom at one time owned, and she was blind. And so, yeah, I don't know if that's one of the reasons why he's mistreating these people so much, to take something out from his mother, but he's abusing poor Isaac Hayes. Yeah, and this is an Isaac Hayes who, despite being 94, seems even older than when, you know, he was jumping on South Park, because this is a pre-South Park, post-Shaft Isaac Hayes. And then what really stirs things up is when you have Ms. Terry Polo show up on the scene. And at the time that this came out, she was actually on a very popular show that was ending its run called Northern Exposure, kind of a silly, almost like, you know, fantastical comedy of sorts that took place in Alaska. But yeah, everybody knows her from the Fokker trilogy, and yeah, all of the silliness that took place in that. But I often think of her for an awesome performance in a little-known sci-fi horror flick called The Arrival that had Charlie Sheen in it, man. And I'm telling you guys, if you have not seen The Arrival, it is really surprisingly good. These aliens and the way their legs like snap backwards and stuff, it makes my skin crawl just thinking about it. And so she also more recently did a film called The Hole, which was basically Joe Dante almost making a like homage, you know, kind of send up of those 80s films like The Goonies and even like Little Monsters and stuff like that, where there was like that, you know, kind of a scary vibe, kind of like what the Goosebumps movie failed to succeed with, in my estimation. So yeah, she's got some horror chops, she's got some horror experience and stuff. And so when she gets to this place and realizes, 1, she's trapped and she can't get out, and 2, she's going to be abused and mistreated and everything, she's like, revolt, we must revolt. And it's just, it's a silly episode at times. You know what's really going on throughout the entirety of it. You know, the 2 performances by the actors that I mentioned are the, at least, positives of this Malo episode, but yeah, there's no real sense of dread or fear, even though, you know, Zerbe is definitely a butthole. He's not, like, scary. It's a good performance, but it's not one that's really going to chill you to the bone or anything like that. And that's because of the way that he's written. He does all that he can with it. But yeah, I can't mention the success or, you know, the eventual outcome of their revolt. But yeah, I mean, another thing to point out is the fact that this was written by a guy named Shel Willens, and I don't even think he'd ever done any features before or after. He did TV work for stuff like, you know, Mr. James Garner, an amazing dude, for his show The Rockford Files, great show, and then he also did a little bit of the Brett Maverick Show, which I believe was a sequel to the original Maverick series, and still before the Maverick movie, which had Mel Gibson and Garner in it. But yeah, the rest was like cheesy Miami Vice, Renegade, and stuff like that. So then, not so good in my estimation. And then directing, you have another nothing person named Jonas McCord, who I think he did a little bit of work with Earth the Final Conflict. He was like an executive producer, scripted a few episodes of that, and then he co-wrote the script for Malice with Aaron Sorkin, which was, actually a movie that had some big stars in it. It had Alec Baldwin, Nicole Kidman, but yeah, these are basically two nothing guys, and sometimes you can get those diamonds in the rough and really elevate somebody with the talent. And that's not to say these guys are total hacks or hams or anything, but just the episode as a whole, it felt shoddily directed. The writing was just so. There's no essence of dread. The humor does not hit. It's just a bad Tales from the Crypt episode, and unfortunately, as I mentioned, an indication of the declining quality here. And then lastly, we are going to get to the Feo peeps. Yeah, that's right. And this is actually more awesomeness with the director and writer, Mr. John Harrison. It's called The Pit. Yeah, I know that's not really what you're probably hoping for, because we're talking like a pit where people are fighting almost like a cage or something. I don't know. I would prefer the pit from Mortal Kombat, but this one gets the Feo distinction because of the fact that it is so 90s. It just blows my mind. You've got these two rival martial artists, or mixed martial art fighter, boxer, I don't know, whatever you would call it. This is probably a pre-UFC craze because this is 94, like I said, but the trash talking between, not the two fighters actually, but their manager wives is some of the most Feo, silly, ridiculous. I mean, it's so of the era, the back and forth and, the news segments, and it's got a very like pro wrestling type vibe to it with like, some of the, shoot pits that are going back and forth. And the funny thing is, the two guys who are being pitted for one last showdown with each other in Vegas, they don't really mind each other too much. You got Stoney Jackson, who was like a Tiger teen beat dude that everybody thought was so cute, I don't know, and then he was like a dancer in one of the Michael Jackson videos, I think Beat It, if I'm not mistaken. And it's funny, the Tales from the Crypt connection here for him is that he actually got in with Walter Hill after doing almost like a mock music video in one of his movies. And so when Walter Hill was making stuff like Wild Bill, he's like, oh, okay, Stoney, I know you're having trouble getting roles and work and stuff like that, so let's toss you in there. He was also in like the CB4 Chris Rock jocumentary about the rapper, and he was playing like an MC Hammer type dude, and they clown hard on him. And then the other guy is Mark DeCascos. I'm probably mispronouncing that, apologies, man. But yeah, he was in Brotherhood of the Wolf, amazing thing, great, creature effects in that one, period piece, French movie. I think the creature effects, if I'm not mistaken, were done by the Henson Company. They look really good, the martial arts is great. That was actually a well-awarded and just a very cool flick. He was also in the Crow Stairway to Heaven, where he played the title role of that fallen rock star coming back, and so he's got some good stuff under his belt. I mean, hey, even the Mortal Kombat Legacy, where he played Kung Lao, was pretty stinking good, although don't get me started on his other video game connection for the Double Dragon movie with that dude from Party of Five. Awful. So yeah, this big fight that's being put together, it's ironically enough done by Mr. Wayne Newton. Yeah, that's right. He's one of the just like faces of Vegas, and he plays this like promoter, like fight, organizer type guy, and so he's the one working with the wives to just push these two dudes who have all of this history and all of this, prior warfare to really go at it for one final time. And yeah, it's so over the top. It's not violent over the top like I wanted. It's not that kind of Feo. It's one that just, it's so of the 90s. It's ugly, silly, stupid, just very of the era, more so than maybe any of the other Tales from the Crypts that I've seen on here. And I actually think what helps it be a good amount of the Feo is the return of John Harrison, the guy I mentioned at the beginning, because he is a George Romero protege who did score work, and he also was like assistant directing for stuff like Creepshow and the Day and the Dawn of the Dead films, and then he went on to score, write, and direct episodes of Tales from the Dark Side, which was Romero's, kind of homage, I guess, to the Tales from the Crypt in the EC books that this series is based on too, but those all being original. These were actually from Tales from the Crypt stories, albeit this one was most definitely updated for modern times with its silliness. I'm sure it was like a crazy boxing match or something back in those early EC comics. I must admit though, it's especially amusing to see Debbie, the Tool Time Girl Dunning, as one of the wife/managers who is just really just bloodthirsty, like crazy bloodthirsty. The other girl, she didn't have as much under her belt. I think she played like Shiva in Mortal Kombat Annihilation, that awful sequel. But yeah, those two broads really wanting to go at it. That's Feo. It's silly, it's stupid, it's over the top. Harrison does a great job though of directing it and really just yeah, putting his own personal stamp of slight silliness upon it. So yeah, at the end, with all accord, it is definitely our Feo episode. And that's going to bring us to the end of our journey for today. I want to extend a grande gracias to all of you guys. Make sure to check out the horrorshowchannel.com, which is where I do all my spooktacular coverage when it is not the month of October. And yeah, you can hit that up just as you're seeing it spelled below. And then I'm Jaime En Fuego, as I've mentioned a few times. Yeah, you can check me out at Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, obviously here on YouTube, and that's just like you're seeing it spelled below. So, adios, sin amigos, and stay scared.